I'm ready. Well, good evening and welcome to our Bible study here at Trinity. And once again, a very warm welcome if you're joining us online. We're still in Matthew. We're still in chapter 8. And this week we will be picking it up at verse 28. That's Matthew chapter 8, verse 28. And if you remember last week, we finished off by looking at Jesus calming the storm. What an experience that must have been, eh? What an experience that must have been. Okay, so I'm just going to read verses 28 and 29. When he arrived at the other side in the region of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men coming from the tombs met him. They were so violent that no one could pass that way. "What do you want with us, Son of God?" they shouted. "Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?" Okay, so having endured that fierce storm and witnessed that amazing miracle of Jesus still in it, they've arrived on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And on arrival, they're met by these 2 men who are described as demon-possessed. And we are told are so violent that nobody could pass that way. And apparently they lived in the tombs. Now, I know a lot of people like to try and pin down geographically where things happened in Jesus' time, but this is very difficult to pinpoint because there are so many names given to this area in the different Gospels and in the different manuscripts that it's never been possible to pin it down with any degree of accuracy. It's believed by many to have been in an area known as the Decapolis, which was a league of 10 Hellenistic cities located to the south and east of the Sea of Galilee. It's likely to be one of those towns that was associated with one of the cities there. All we know for sure is that it took place on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. And it couldn't have been in any town because the tombs are mentioned and tombs were never put inside the towns. So it's likely Jesus and his boat landed in a fairly barren place. So we're told that these men were living among the tombs. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first started reading this, I thought, living in the same room as dead bodies, that don't sound very ideal to me. But then we have to remember that in those days, tombs were not 6 foot by 3 foot holes in the ground that you were lowered into. They were more like caves that were cut out of the rock. And a gentleman by the name of William McClure William McClure Thompson, who was the son of a Presbyterian minister, a graduate of Miami University, and a 19th century American Protestant missionary. And he worked in Ottoman Syria. And he writes this: after spending 25 years in Syria, he published a best-selling book that describes his experiences and observations during his travels. He used his knowledge to illustrate the region and explain passages from the Bible, giving the readers a new perspective on scriptures based on what he'd seen. In his book, he writes, "The rock-cut tombs in the region between Tyre and Sidon, they are nearly all of the same form, having a small chamber in front and a door leading from that into the tomb, which was about 6 feet square with niches on 3 sides for the dead." So that throws a different light on it. Now all of a sudden we see a tomb's got 2 rooms and we can sleep in the outer room and leave the dead bodies on the inside one out of the way. And incidentally, this propensity for people, especially, how can I put it politely, mentally unhinged people, to live in tombs is mentioned by a lot of ancient physicians. It's mentioned by them as a characteristic of madmen. So it's likely that these men were living in the first chamber that you come to when you enter a tomb. And interestingly enough, this gentleman I've just been talking about, William Thompson, in his book, Remember, he's writing in the 19th century now. In his book, he says, there are some very similar cases all at the present day. Furious and dangerous maniacs who wander about the mountains and sleep in eaves and tombs. In their worst paroxysms, they are quite unmanageable and prodigiously strong. And it is one of the most common traits of this madness that the victims refuse to wear clothes. I have often seen them absolutely naked in the crowded streets of Beirut and Sidon. There are also cases in which they run wildly about the country and frighten the whole neighborhood. So this gentleman is writing about experience he's seen for his own eyes. So that tells us straight away that this incident in the Bible is not likely to be something that has been made up, because this gentleman has confirmed that it's happened 1,000 years or more later. And the medical profession of the day, a lot of whom who weren't Christians and followers of God, have also gone down as writing that there was a tendency for people who they describe as madmen to live in these tombs. So Jesus gets off the boat and he meets these two men who are described as demon-possessed. Matthew tells us that these men, or rather the demons controlling the men, recognized who Jesus was straight away, because they called him the Son of God. They know that he has absolute power over them and can choose either to cast them out or not, and to decide even where they go. There's no negotiating here, as if they were equal partners at the negotiating table. Jesus is superior and they know it, and they've recognized him straight away. But interestingly, they also know that sometime in the future there's a time of torture coming up, because they mention it. Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time? So not only do they know who Jesus is, they know that sometime in the future they've got a horrible experience coming. Yeah. Yes. They already know it. Have you come to torture us before the appointed time? Now then, when I was reading this story, one question came to mind as I was researching this, and that was, we know the demons recognized who Jesus was and they were afraid of him. So why on earth did they come out to meet him? Why didn't they just stay out of his way? And the answer I came to, the conclusion I came to is, they didn't come out to meet him. And John Gill says this: these possessed men met him, not purposely or with design, but accidentally to them, and unawares to Satan too. For though he knows much, he is not omniscient. Had he been aware of Christ's coming that way and what he was about to do, he would have took care to have taken the possessed out of the way. But it was ordered by providence that just as Christ landed, these two should be coming out of the tomb. So in other words, they didn't come out to meet him. They just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, if you can put it like that. You could say it was a bit unlucky, really, for them, but I think it was providence. It was meant to happen. Okay, verses 30 to 32. Some distance from them, a large herd of pigs was feeding. The demons begged Jesus, "If you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs." He said to them, "Go." So they came out and went into the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and died in the water. Excuse me. We'll come to that now in a minute. Now, Matthew tells us that there was a herd of pigs feeding some distance from where they were. Now, you all know that it's unlawful for Jews to keep pigs. They're forbidden to keep them, not even for the purpose of selling them on or moving them on. They're not allowed to eat them. They're unclean animals. They're not allowed to touch them. So that leads us to one of two conclusions. Either these pigs were owned by Jews who had expressly violated the law, or these pigs were owned by Gentiles. And judging by the reaction that we'll see in a minute to the local people around this area, I would imagine they belonged to the Gentiles. Farmers who bred pigs. Don't forget the Romans liked pork. Just because the Jews weren't allowed to eat it, there's plenty of other people who would. These farmers bred these pigs not only to sell in the markets locally, but the Roman army would have had loads of them. Now, interestingly, Matthew doesn't record what Jesus said in reply to the demon's comment about being tortured, if he said anything at all. But the demons pleaded with Jesus to let them go into this herd of pigs. Now, I tried hard to look into this. I spent hours looking for this one. Why on earth would demons want to go into a herd of pigs? Some Bible commentators say it was because Jesus was punishing the Jews who owned the pigs for breaking the law of Moses. That's some commentators. Some commentators say that Jesus was punishing the Gentile owners for raising the pigs when they lived among Jews, for whom pigs were an unclean and forbidden animal. The conclusion I came to, and the most likely reason I believe, is that they asked Jesus for permission to go into the pigs. They knew Jesus would not cast them out of one person and allow them to go into another for a start. And so the pigs were a far better option than being sent to the abyss or being allowed to wander aimlessly around the land. And that's why they chose to go into the pigs, because the abyss scared the life out of them, and they didn't like wandering around the land aimlessly, so they thought, well, if we can't stay in this guy, you won't let us go into that guy, we'll take the pigs. That's basically what happened. Absolutely. Yep. That's it. That would have been the end of it. But there's a bigger picture here, you know. The one thing is for sure that the demons couldn't have seen the result of them going into the pigs. The result was this whole herd suddenly ran down the hill into the sea and drowned. If they'd seen that coming, they probably wouldn't have asked for it. All they were trying to do is find a new place to live, a new place to wreak havoc, to do their damage, and to avoid being sent to the pit or being made to wander around the land. So Jesus gives them permission to enter the pigs, go, which they do. And as we all know, the herd rushes down the hill and was drowned. Now, some commentators I found have suggested the demons were responsible for that, but I don't believe that for a minute. Because if their object is avoiding wandering the land and avoiding the pit, why would they drown the very place they're going to make home? They couldn't have known it was going to happen. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, they ended up wandering around the land aimlessly anyway. So that is what happened to them after the pigs drowned. There was nowhere else for them to go. I dare say in the course of time they might have found some other human host to find. There was plenty of people there exercising and sorcery and all the rest of it. They would have found somewhere else to go eventually. But for now, they've ended up homeless, wandering around the land. No, that's right. Anywhere, that's right. Absolutely. Well, let's be honest, human races are good at giving them reasons to come, aren't they? Even today. Okay, 33 and 34. Those tending the pigs ran off, went into the town, and reported all this, including what had happened to the demon-possessed men. Then the whole town went out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they pleaded with him to leave their region. Now, excuse me, we're told the herdsmen were terrified by what they saw and ran into the town. I can see why the word terrified comes into that. It must have been quite an experience, you know. In a way, It doesn't say exactly. Some versions mention 2,000. Yeah. Some mention 2,000. It must have been quite a sight. Yeah. And think about the apostles who were just hard on the back of witnessing Jesus calm a storm. And now they're seeing this with the demons thrown out and a whole herd of pigs rushing down into the sea. So they've gone into town. And, you know, when we all see something amazing or terrifying, we want to tell somebody about it, don't we? You know, we've got to go and get it off our chest. Tell them, you'll never guess what I just seen out there. It's a natural reaction. So they've gone into the town and told everybody about it. Matthew says, the town came out to see Jesus, or the people came out to see Jesus. Some commentators have made the suggestion, and I can believe this, that the reason they came out to see Jesus was because they were going to have it out with him. Because don't forget, somebody's just lost 2,000 pigs. That is an awful lot of pork. Somebody's bank account has been depleted severely. And these commentators have suggested that the townspeople have come out to have it out with Jesus. They're more concerned with their economic loss than they are with the significance of this miracle. Now, Mark and Luke, if you look in there, add details that Matthew doesn't. And they say that when the townspeople got there, they saw the man or the men, depends on which gospel you read. They see the men in their right mind. Now, that must have been a game changer to start with, because don't forget, these would have been local characters. The tombs wouldn't have been all that far away from the town that the people didn't know them. They would have known they were there. They would have been a local legend, if you like. And coming out from the town and seeing these two suddenly in their right mind and dressed and sat down listening to Jesus, whoa, what's going on there? So if they've come out to see Jesus and have it out with him, that is likely to have stopped them in their tracks to start with. Seeing these blokes who they knew were mad, who everybody was too afraid to go near because they were so violent, and now they're dressed, they're in their right mind, and they're sat listening to Jesus. It wouldn't have been a great stretch of the imagination for the people of the town to have accepted what's gone on. It wouldn't have been a question of them saying, nah, I don't believe that, not for 1 minute. I'm going to go and see this for myself. Because don't forget, even the Gentiles, or the pagans as the Jews called them, they believed in evil spirits. Exorcists were everywhere in the pagan world. You could go and get your fortune read with the stones or the bones or whatever they used to use to do it with. So it wouldn't have been any surprise to them about demons being cast out. They might not have known who Jesus was, but they would certainly have known he was a Jew. And they would also have recognized that based on what's gone on, this man's got an astonishing amount of power. Probably more than they've ever seen before in any of their own exorcists and whatever you want to call them. But it wouldn't have taken them long to realize that somebody who they perceived to be a Jewish exorcist with an astonishing amount of power is going to be a threat to their way of life. I mean, they've just seen 2,000 pigs. We'll pick on that number because that's what one of the Gospels says. They've just witnessed 2,000 pigs drown themselves in the sea because of this man. And so they're going to perceive that he is a threat to their way of life. And don't forget, not only is the owner who owned this herd of pigs lost 2,000 pigs, but the people looking after them have just lost their job. And so they can see that if this goes on, this perceived Jewish exorcist is going to cost them a lot of money and change their way of life. Yeah. It could have been. Yep. It could have been. Yep. And that exacerbates the economic loss. So, yeah. This incident would have highlighted cultural and religious differences. And Jesus' presence there has started to challenge the beliefs and reputations of the local pagan inhabitants. Don't forget, they'll have known he's Jewish. It would have stood out like a sore thumb. They would have known that pigs were unclean animals for the Jews. And it would have taken them long to put two and two together and see this man as a threat to their economic way of life. And then there would have been an element of fear, a fear of change. Because don't forget, human beings, we're all the same. From the time Adam was born to the time the last person lives on this planet, we don't like change. We like the status quo. We don't like things disrupting our daily way of life. And here they've seen this man come along, and he's a threat to their way of life, and that frightens them. Healing these demon-possessed men has disrupted the status quo. They were used to seeing the men the way they were. They accepted them the way they were. And now not only do they have to accept the fact that they're healed, but they've got to accept them back into their society again. They were terrified, probably frightened of Jesus and his powers as well, and all that they perceived that meant, and that's why they said, leave our area. They pleaded with Jesus to leave, to go. What an opportunity they've missed, though, eh? All the sick people there that could have been healed. But all they were concerned about is their economic welfare, their way of life. But as I was working through this, one thing occurred to me that probably not many people have ever thought about. And that is, what about the demon-possessed men themselves? Did they know they were demon-possessed? Or did they think that was just them, who they were, running around the tombs, yelling at everybody and scaring the life out of people? Did they know they were demon-possessed? And that leads to the question, if the demons had simply been cast out and sent to wander or sent to the abyss, would they ever have known they were demon-possessed? Yeah. 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 Yeah, but you've got the advantage of knowing 2,000 years after Jesus paid the price on the cross. These guys have never met Jesus before. You know, all they would have known is that they feel better. Yeah. The point I'm trying to get across is they might realize that they feel better. They might realize that they're not as angry. They might realize that they're different. But would they have known why? You know? John Ellicott says this: we are at least on the right track in suggesting that only in some such way the men be delivered from the inextricable confusion between himself and the unclean spirits in which he had been involved. Not till he saw the demonic forces that had oppressed him transferred into the body of other creatures and working on them the effects which they had wrought on him could they believe in their own deliverance. What he's saying in effect is, if Jesus had simply cast these demons out, would they have ever known that they'd been freed from demons? Or would they have just gone through life assuming that they were ill before and now they feel better? But the fact that they've seen these demons go into the pigs and cause chaos now makes them know that they were demon-possessed and that Jesus has actually thrown these demons out of their life. Sorry, say that again. Just the demons. Just the demons. They didn't go anywhere. They stayed there, yeah, with Jesus. Yeah. The spirits came out of them. Don't forget, we're spirit beings. That's why spirits can get in if you let them, if you give them room. And they were cast out. And the point these experts are trying to make is that did the men know they were demon-possessed, or did they just know they were perhaps ill or not nice people? And then when Jesus had come along, would they ever have known if they hadn't seen the demons going into the pigs? Or would they have just assumed that Jesus has touched them and they're better? Yeah. So, yeah. Exactly, that's what we're coming on to. Yep. Yeah. So, Matthew doesn't mention this, but the other Gospels the men have asked Jesus if they could go with them. And why wouldn't they, after what they've just been through? An amazing deliverance. Their lives have been changed, literally in a second. But Jesus tells them no. Go back to your place and tell everybody what I've done for you. In other words, evangelize for me. Jesus has just been told to leave the area. This isn't the first visit to the Decapolis that Jesus makes, because a lot of his miracles were done in this area later on in his ministry. But these men are now preparing the way, if you like. They're going back into the town. They're telling everybody what Jesus has just done for them. The Bible records that Jesus visited this area again, in fact, twice, and a lot of his greatest miracles were performed there. And Jesus has used this opportunity to let the men know exactly what he's done for them. Not that he's just healed them, that they feel better, but that he's had demons thrown out of him. Go back and tell the people what I've done for you. Because the next time Jesus comes, they're likely to be a little bit more receptive to what Jesus is bringing. Don't forget, Jesus doesn't force himself on anyone. And that is why when the people said, leave our area, he did, because they asked him to. On the way over from Capernaum, we've seen the miracle of the calming of the storm, which revealed Jesus' authority over nature. This miracle of casting out the demons revealed the authority of Jesus over the spirit world as well. And Matthew has included this incident in his gospel. And the point is clearly made: Jesus was the Son of God and has power over all things, including the powers of darkness. That's why Matthew included this, because Matthew's intention, don't forget in writing, is to convince the Jews that Jesus is the Son of God. And he's including in his gospel everything that's going to prove that and back up what he's trying to say. He's not necessarily so hot on the details like the other gospel writers are, because that's not the point. He's just trying to get across the fact that it's happened. Because he's writing to the Jews whom he's trying to get to believe that Jesus is the Messiah. And that's the end of chapter 8, so I think we'll call it a day there.